Hey guys, and welcome to this video called Peace Deal and the Third Temple. So the rapture of the church is imminent. I know that we're obviously still here after the 430-day marker, but Jupiter is still in Scorpio, and the sun is also still there. So the Great Red Dragon theory isn't quite over yet, and just the pace of things which has been happening over the last few days, I've just been staggered by everything that's been coming out. So I'm going to go over that in revision first, and then I'm going to go through the next couple of days that's coming up over Hanukkah and why we should find those interesting. So let's start. The first interesting day that we said was November the 17th. Now, this article here says November the 16th, but actually the resolutions that were taken at the United Nations on this day would have ended on the 17th, well, what would have been the 9th of Kislev, and they took 9 resolutions or condemnations against Israel. And these are the voting boards here, as you can see now. All the green marks are the countries that voted against Israel or in favor of the resolution against Israel. And then the 2, which is just in this case Israel and the United States, are obviously in red. Those are the countries that were against the resolution, which was condemning Israel, and then the abstentions, which are yellow. So there were 9 anti-Israel resolutions at the United Nations, 9 of them on the 9th of Kislev, which is the 9th month. So here you can see overwhelming majority, and of course one country stands for one vote, so that's just how it works. Persons displaced as a result of the June 1967 subsequent hostilities. I'll put these this link in the video, but as you can see, an overwhelming majority of the world voting against Israel and condemning Israel. And God says that it is the day of the Lord's vengeance and the year of recompenses for the controversy of Israel. God has brought them back to the land, and the world hates it. And as you can see, they vote in such a manner in the United Nations. So this happened on the day, the last vote. You can see all these votes here are in favor of condemning Israel, and the last vote was at 12 or midday in New York or Eastern time, and that would have been the 9th of Kislev in Israel. So that was the first interesting day that we saw. Then on the day during the 9th of Kislev, we saw that Trump went to the California fires, and he visited the California devastation, and that was on his 666th day. So I thought that was quite interesting, and I won't go any further into that, but there are some suggestions that this is direct energy weapons, and I'll leave it at that. So the next one was on the 24th. EU, the European Union, blasts Israeli settlement expansion. The United Nations says Arab house demolitions and building approvals in Jerusalem neighborhoods continues to undermine the two-state solution. So here they are, the European Union condemning Israel once again, and that was during that period of 10 days there. So we've seen the United Nations and the European Union condemning Israel in this period of time. Then we saw on the 25th a gas pipeline to connect Israel and Europe, and this is the death knell for Russia, because this threatens the Russian economy and Putin's wealth personally, and this is the hook in the Russian jaw. So the Ezekiel 38-39 war, which God says He's going to put hooks in the jaw and pull Gog down, and here we see Israel have just announced that this is a multi-billion-dollar pipeline, and they've signed this deal which will transport gas into Greece and Italy. So that happened in that midweek as well. And then on the very day after 430 days, obviously it wasn't the rapture because we're still here. But anyways, on the very day, Danny Danon, the ambassador to the United Nations, Israeli ambassador, says that the US peace plan is completed. So this is the first time that we've heard that the peace plan is completed, and it is ready to be released. We have been told, the world has been told now that this deal is ready to go. So in revision of Daniel 9:27, it says, "And he shall confirm the covenant with the many for 1 week." And a lot of people think that confirmation might mean somebody else comes along and confirms it. But in the position that we stand in right now, if the rapture were to happen very shortly, the confirmation would be a matter of time. So the rapture of the church happens, and then he shall confirm the covenant with the many for 1 week. And so that was very, very interesting. On the very day, on the 430th day, as you can see, the 27th of November, this was announced that this plan would be released next year. So Danny Danon on Tuesday said that President Donald Trump's administration has told Israel that it will present its long-awaited Middle East peace plan early next year. So on this day, which was the Tuesday, 430 days, we were told that the plan is now complete. So I think that's that's interesting, and we look forward to seeing what's about to happen. And obviously, the next feast is Hanukkah. But I just want to go on to say that the stuff has been happening. So much stuff has been happening, and so quickly that it's almost been difficult to keep up. We've also seen on the 28th, which was the next day, the United Nations says that East Jerusalem must be the capital of Palestine. UN Secretary General calls for Jerusalem to be the capital of the Palestinian state. So these things are coming. This is coming. They're going to divide the land of Israel. And this was they have this the Palestine Remembrance Day, because on the 29th of November, which was yesterday, in 1947, that was the partition plan to end the Palestinian Mandate, which was the British-French Mandate, and that's when they partitioned Palestine. So that has happened, and all this has happened in the space of just a couple of weeks. So prophecy is flying at the moment, and everything is just, every single day there's a major news release, which is something that we should really be paying attention to get us ready for this time. The rapture of the church is absolutely imminent, guys. Then we also saw on the 27th of November, after 430 days, designer baby steps world's first gene-edited children born in China. Right? So these are the days of Noah, guys. They're messing around with genetic modification and manipulating the human genome. They are acting as God while denying that he exists. And this is the source code of creation. This is what God, he said that all flesh had defiled itself. All the GMO stuff which is happening, and the things that they're doing to our crops, Sensi seed, and these patented seed genetics manipulation of seeds and things like that by Monsanto. That's exactly what they were doing before the flood of Noah. So this is also a very, very important announcement about children are now being born having their genes edited, and God wiped out the whole world the last time because of these kinds of things, guys. Right, then the conflict, the Jupiter and the Sun, and in Scorpio, the conflict began. So we saw a flare-up between Russia and Ukraine, which has happened, and Russian Navy vessels actually fired on Ukrainian ships, and have now captured their ships and arrested the soldiers who they're going to keep for 2 months. And I'm going to go over this in list form in a second. So Ukraine has now said that Russia are amassing forces along their border, and they have implemented martial law. So we see this flaring up of conflicts, which is happening. And then the most important thing, which I believe has been released, is the Sanhedrin are about to invite 70 nations to Hanukkah dedication of the altar for the third temple. So do not underestimate this this activity, what they are just about to do. Do not underestimate it. This is profound. This is absolutely profound. These are the Jews, guys. These are the Jews. They're just about to do something here. And this is the first time that they've actually built an altar. And I'm going to go into this a little bit more detail prophetically, and the things that have happened in the past and why we should consider this as so important. These are the Sanhedrins. Yes, they are blind, but they are the Jewish people, and God, he tells his story through the Jewish nation of Israel. So this is an incredible announcement. It says here that the priests will perform a korban mishnah, in which the grain offerings that accompany the tamid are offered along with the wine libation. A large menorah will be lit as a part of the ceremony, and the rabbi explained the significance of the ceremony being held on the last day of Hanukkah. So one of the things in this article you'll see, if you read this, anybody who knows about Christian replacement theology is when a Christian reads the Bible and he doesn't rightly divide. He takes the church and he appropriates the promises that God made to Israel, and he gives them to the church, and then suggests that God is finished with Israel. That is replacement theology. It is the doctrine of devils. It is the church calling themselves Jews, and they are not Jews, and that is the synagogue of Satan. When somebody wants to tell you those who call themselves Jews and are not, is Jesus admonishing the churches, telling the churches what they're getting wrong, just like every other complaint that he has about the churches in the book of Revelation, chapters 2 and 3. He's telling the churches, those who call themselves Jews and are not are the synagogue of Satan. That is replacement theology. The Bible addresses replacement theology in such a way that the haters of Israel and the anti-Semites actually fall into that trap. It's actually a scriptural trap, believe it or not. That synagogue of Satan scripture is a trap for people who hate Israel and are anti-Semitic, and they think it's talking about the Jews, but Jesus says very clearly, those who call themselves Jews and are not are the synagogue of Satan. And then you'll get the people who will say that the Jews in Israel are from Europe and they're not real Jews. That's a lot of nonsense. Everything that happened with the Holocaust and Ezekiel chapter 37, dry bones prophecy, proved that is the nation of Israel came out of the valley of dry bones. The valley of dry bones prophecy in Ezekiel chapter 37 was delivered to the prophet Ezekiel on the very same day that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were put into the fiery furnace by Nebuchadnezzar. So that day, just think about that for a second, the day that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were put into the fiery furnace when the Israelites were in exile, was the same day that the prophet Ezekiel received the Ezekiel chapter 37 prophecy, the valley of dry bones. And that's the Vistula Valley, which is where Auschwitz is. That's the valley of dry bones. So they are just about to do this, and I'm really excited to see what happens, because things have happened in the past when they've set up altars and things like this after a long period of time where the temple hasn't been around. So, peace deal and third temple. The rapture is imminent. That's the name of this video again. In review, two interesting dates: 17th of November, that was the 9th of Kislev; 27th of November, 19th of Kislev. The 17th of November, 9 resolutions condemning Israel to the United Nations. All resolutions were voted on by the nations of the world and all passed by a vast majority, as you saw. 27th of November, confirmation given that the peace deal of the century is complete. Danny Danon, Israel envoy to United Nations. And the 27th of November, designer baby steps world's first gene-edited children born in China. And the peace deal is now set to be released in 2019. Also, on the 29th, that was the United Nations partition plan for Palestine. That was a proposal by the United Nations which recommended the partition of mandatory Palestine at the end of the British Mandate, Resolution 181. So all these things are culminating. They're all coming together very, very closely now, one day after another. Something's coming soon. And then they set up the International Day of Palestine, and that was created in 1977, which is the commemoration of the Palestinian people, and that's a 3-day event, which is ending today. So they have been blaspheming the mountains of Israel at the United Nations. One of the representatives for CNN, Mark Lamont Hill, he's actually lost his job. CNN have fired him. Openly called for the destruction of the Jewish state when he said in his speech, "Justice requires a free Palestine from the river to the sea," and all of the United Nations applauded him. It was the only applause that was received, and they all applauded him when he called for the destruction of the Jewish state, which is he's calling for another Holocaust. There's nothing. There was nothing to be misunderstood by what he was saying. And we saw conflict spawned as Jupiter and the Sun are in Scorpio. The conflict. There's tension building in the Ukraine with Russian forces firing on and seizing 3 Ukrainian vessels, 2 Navy vessels, and a tugboat, and the soldiers and captains of the vessels have been arrested and will be detained for 2 months. On the 26th of November, the Ukrainian parliament overwhelmingly backed the imposition of martial law along Ukraine's coastal regions and those bordering Russia and Transnistria. A total of 276 lawmakers backed the measure, which takes effect on 28th November. So they are the border of Ukraine, which faces the Black Sea and Russia, is now under a martial law, and the president is suggesting that a Russian ground invasion may be imminent. And then yesterday, Israel struck Iranian targets in Syria once again, and the Syrian air defense fired on Israeli fighter planes. The Israeli projectiles or missiles were shot down, but despite claims by Syria that an Israeli jet was shot down, the IDF have rejected this or refuted that suggestion. Okay, so here we are at what's coming next, and I just want to cover this quick dispensational verse in the Bible, which is in Acts chapter 15, where it says they're having the Jerusalem Council. They're having this argument. And they're saying, well, what's going to happen with the Jewish people? So James, who's the head of the church, that's the Lord's brother, says, Simeon, who is Peter, hath declared how God at the first did visit the Gentiles to take out of them a people for his name. So that is Pentecost, and that was when the dispensation began. And to this agree the words of the prophets, and he quotes Amos 11, as it is written, after this, that's after the church, I will return and will build again the tabernacle of David, which is fallen down. So it's a very specific, it's a very explicit thing that's going to happen. When the rapture of the church happens, the tabernacle of David is going to be built up, which is fallen down. And I will build again the ruins thereof, and I will set it up that the residue of men, that's referred to as the heathen in Amos, as we'll see, might seek after the Lord, and all the Gentiles or heathen upon whom my name is called, saith the Lord, who doeth these things. So he's telling us that at the end of the dispensation, the tabernacle is going to be set up, or that's the temple, that's the tabernacle of David. Now, here's the thing: Jesus and Daniel recognize the sacrifice that is going to take place in the third temple, which is built by the Jews and which will be invaded by the Antichrist. Remember that the abomination of desolation causes the sacrifice and oblation to cease. That's the abomination of desolation. It's not the sacrifice and the oblation which is an abomination. The sacrifice and the oblation is recognized by Daniel and by Jesus Christ. The Antichrist is the abomination of desolation that causes the sacrifice and oblation to cease. So, if a lot of people have a prejudice about the Jews are going to worship the Antichrist and all these kinds of things, the Bible doesn't suggest that. And the verse that James is referring to in Acts chapter 15 is in Amos 9:11. It says, "In that day will I raise up the tabernacle of David that is fallen, and close up the breaches thereof, and I will raise up his ruins, and I will build it." Now this is the most important part. As in the days of old, right? So this is not talking about Ezekiel chapter 40 to 46. That's a totally different kind of temple. That temple looks different. It has different geometrics. It has a totally different kind of architecture. It's completely different to all the temples that come before it. This says that the tabernacle of David, that is the temple, is going to be built as in the days of old, and the Jews are going to build that temple just like it was. They have the plans. You can see they've got it. It looks exactly like what Zerubbabel or Herod's temple, the second. It looks exactly like what the second temple looks like. So this is a dispensational verse. This tells us very specifically what's going to happen after the rapture of the church, which is the end of the church. Then comes the temple. So the period of Hanukkah is very related to the temple, and it's about temple dedication and all these kinds of things. But the actual day goes back a lot further. The Hanukkah period starts off on the 25th of Kislev, which is the ninth month. But before that is obviously the 24th and the 25th of Kislev, which is coming up now. That's Sunday. That's Sunday and Monday, which is in a couple of days. So Sunday the 2nd, and Monday the 3rd. The day actually goes back a lot further before that. So Haggai, it talks about Zerubbabel, and when Zerubbabel went to rebuild the temple when the first temple was destroyed. So this date, 24th and the 25th of Kislev, goes back way before the Maccabean revolt and before the rededication of the temple, when Antiochus Epiphanes was conquered, and then they created Hanukkah, which was like a second Feast of Tabernacles. So this is long before then. This is about 530 BC. So it says, "Consider now from this day upward," this is God, "from the 24th day of the 9th month, even from the day that the foundation of the Lord's temple was laid." So the foundation of the Lord's temple, the second temple, was laid on the 24th of Kislev, and the rededication of the second temple was on the 25th of Kislev. So the temple is very closely related to these two dates. And it says there, he goes on to say, so even from the day that the foundation of the Lord's temple was laid. So the Lord's temple was laid on the 24th of Kislev, the second temple, when Zerubbabel first went to go build it. "Is the seed yet in the barn? ? Yea, as yet the vine and the fig tree and the pomegranate and the olive tree hath not brought forth. From this day I will bless you." Okay? So that's the first time that it talks about this date. So if we have a look, when Allenby conquered Jerusalem in 1917, and he took it back from the Turkish Ottoman Empire, He conquered Jerusalem on the 9th of December, and the 9th of December in 1917 was the 24th of Kislev. So this is a very important date as far as Jerusalem and the temple goes. So that's the first reference to this date in Haggai. The second reference in Haggai is even more interesting. Listen to what it says. In Haggai 2:20 it says, and again, so a second time, the word of the Lord came unto Haggai in the 24th day of the month, saying, speak to Zerubbabel, governor of Judah, saying, I will shake the heavens and the earth, and I will overthrow the throne of kingdoms, and I will destroy the strength of the kingdoms of the heathen, and I will overthrow the chariots and those that ride in them, and the horses and their riders shall come down. Remember the riders. It's talking about horses and riders here. Everyone by the sword of his brother. In that day, saith the Lord of hosts, will I take thee, O Zerubbabel, my servant, the son of Shealtiel, saith the Lord, and will make thee as a signet, for I have chosen thee, saith the Lord of hosts. So, on this very day, which is the 24th of Kislev, that's Sunday, it talks about God shaking the earth. Okay, so and we saw that Jerusalem was captured by the British from the Turkish Ottoman Empire on this very day, 1917. The Turkish Ottoman Empire surrendered. So this was a long time before the Maccabean revolt. This was a long time before Hanukkah came around. It's talking about the 24th of Kislev. Separately from, this is obviously the first day of Hanukkah, as we know. The 24th is the eve of Hanukkah, and the 25th of Kislev is when they instituted the feast of Hanukkah, because that's when it was, as we'll see, that's when the temple was defiled, or the first time that the abomination of desolation happened. And also that was when the temple was cleansed on that very day. So we've got two very, very interesting days coming up. So then the Maccabees and Hanukkah. So this was hundreds of years later. This was around 130 BC, after the second temple had been built, and it had been in operation for several hundred years. And then Antiochus Epiphanes came in and defiled the temple and set up idols and all these kinds of things. It says in 1 Maccabees 4:44, so I'll link in a good place to read the Maccabees. And it says, and when, as they consulted what to do with the altar of the burnt offerings, so they've now recaptured the temple in Jerusalem, which was profaned, they thought it best to pull down, lest should be a reproach to them. So they pulled down the altar because the heathen had defiled it, wherefore they pulled it down. And they laid up stones in the mountain of the temple in a convenient place, until there should come a prophet to show them what should be done with them. Okay, so then they took whole stones according to the law. Now remember what we just saw with the Sanhedrin, what the Sanhedrin are about to do, right? They took whole stones according to the law and built an altar according to the former, and made up a sanctuary and the things that were within the temple and hallowed courts. They made also new holy vessels, and into the temple they brought the candlestick and the altar of burnt offerings and of incense and the table. And upon the altar they burnt incense and the lamps, and were upon the candlesticks they lighted, that they might give light into the temple. Furthermore, they set the loaves upon the table and spread out the veils and finished all the works which they had begun to make. Now on the 25th day of the 9th month, which is called the month of, that's the old rendering of Kislev, in the 148th year, that would have been in the 148th year of Rome, they rose up betimes in the morning and offered sacrifice according to the law upon new altar of burnt offerings which they had made. Look at what time and what day the heathen had profaned it. Even in that was it dedicated with songs and cisterns and harps and cymbals. So it's saying, look at the day that they rededicated the temple, in the very day that it was defiled at the first, and that's, so we can see that Zerubbabel laid the foundations of the first temple and built an altar to the Lord, and the Maccabees and the rededication of the temple that happened, which started off the festival of Hanukkah, did exactly the same thing. And the Sanhedrin are just about to do that in a couple of days. And then, interestingly, in Maccabees 5, if you go on to read, it says, "Now when the nations," here we go, "round about heard that the altar was built and the sanctuary was renewed as before, it displeased them very much." Sounds like Jacob's trouble. "Wherefore they thought to destroy the generation of Jacob that was among them, and thereupon they began to slay and destroy the people." So, guys, the Sanhedrin invites 70 nations to Hanukkah dedication altar for the third temple. This temple is coming, and it's all very, very interesting for us as Christians. We're watching. We know that we're not going to be here, and we know that we're going to get snatched out of here. So this is also quite interesting. If you look at the moon phases, we see as we come into Hanukkah, we see that Scorpio. What it'll say here, there's two Scorpios, but this one here, this waning crescent, this on Wednesday the 5th, this should actually be Ophiuchus. So it goes. The moon itself goes from Libra. And then on the 4th, it's to Scorpio. And then on the 5th, it says Scorpio, but in actual fact, it's really Ophiuchus because they decided to kick Ophiuchus out. And then on Thursday the 6th and Friday the 7th are new moons in Sagittarius. And of course, we know that Sagittarius is the rider with a bow and a crown. And that is the representation of the Antichrist in the constellations. And so the new moon on Saturday the 8th will be in Sagittarius, which is the constellation of the Antichrist. So I thought that was quite interesting. We have a new moon which will then take us into the month of Tevet, which is the 10th month, and that will be the new moon will be in Sagittarius. So guys, I hope you keep watching. Sorry about the 430-day thing. I thought that was a winner, but as you can see, it's the rapture of the church is imminent, guys. It's absolutely imminent. It's everything is conjuncting. Every day is a new story, which is prolific and profound as far as prophecy goes. And prophecy is it's gone from a drip to a drizzle to a fire hose. It's literally every day stuff is coming out, and it's really exciting. And I just want to encourage you to read the Word of God, stay in the Word, pray, and just look forward to everything being made perfect. In the new kingdom is going to be such rest. We're not going to have any of these problems. We've got so many problems, and the things which are going on in this world, the things which are going on in Yemen, all the starvation in the world, all the suffering and the cold, and the people who don't have homes, and the refugees, guys. I mean, like those people, they're people out there. They don't have homes, and I understand that the immigration thing is, it's a difficult thing to swallow, but there are so many people who are suffering, and we really just need to give thanks for just for the tea bag in our cup. If you can make some tea, and if you've got a roof over your head, and if you've got hot water, and if you've got a comfortable bed, or if you've even got a bed, and you've got a home, and there is so much to be thankful for. If you can move, if you're mobile, there are so many people who are not even mobile. If you can breathe properly, and if you can just think, just think of the Word of God, because you've had access to the Word of God. There's so much to be thankful for, and we just need to give praise and honor and glory to the King of Kings. And we know that He is in control of all these things. He is supreme, and He is sovereign over everything. And He's going to fix this all, guys. He's going to make everything right. Don't worry about anything. Don't worry about I know it's easy to say don't worry about your family and that kind of thing, but really, just rest on the King, and rest on his ability to make everything right, and just cast your cares upon the King, because that's what he wants us to do. And it's okay to cry. I do cry a lot, although I probably don't look like the person who cries a lot, but I weep often for the things which are going on in this world, and I weep for my sin, and the inability to do anything in this world. Jesus said he knows that we have a little strength. The Church of Philadelphia, that we have a little strength, and that's how I feel. I feel like a tiny little sparrow on the rooftop of a home, chirping in a storm which is like Hurricane Michael, just this tiny little sparrow. And it's just, but we're all together, and we are one. We are one body, and I pray that you would have peace in your hearts, and just look forward to the King, guys. He's coming.